Prince William breaks down in tears as Prince Harry reveals how much he still loves him. In a shocking private moment, years of silence shattered. No cameras, no script, just raw emotion between two brothers forever changed by loss. What Harry said next left William speechless, and the royal world shaken. The silent reunion that shocked the palace. On October 1st, 2025, everything paused inside the Sandringham estate. It wasn't on the official royal calendar, it wasn't even announced. But at 11:08 a.m., something no one believed would happen did. Prince William walked into the private family chapel once visited by Princess Diana. Minutes later, Prince Harry followed. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 4 years. There were no cameras, no royal aides, just silence, and history hanging heavy in the air. The chapel, tucked deep within the estate, had once been a quiet retreat for Diana herself. Now it became the place where the brothers would stand face to face, not as royals, but as sons. Witnesses said their eyes met for only a second. No smile, no handshake, but no turning away either. For a family known for cold formality, that was a breakthrough. Insiders were terrified this would go wrong. Some feared it could ignite old tensions, but what started with tension turned into something else. Because this reunion didn't begin with apologies or demands. It began with one word whispered by Harry that no one expected: Catherine. And from that moment, the tone changed completely. Catherine's unseen role in their private bond. It was Prince Harry who broke the silence first, and he didn't start with blame or defense. Instead, he turned to William and quietly said, "She's always been there for you. I never said it before, but I love her for that." He was talking about Catherine, not as the future queen, not as the Duchess of Cambridge, but simply as his sister. Harry shared how, in the early 2000s, when Kate first became part of their world, she reminded him of their mother, gentle, grounded, and quietly strong. He remembered moments where she held William together, when the pressure nearly crushed him. "When she came into your life," Harry said, "it felt like you had someone who made the world a little softer." He even admitted that during the worst years, especially around 2019, when headlines exploded and the family splintered, he still trusted her. She never added to the noise. She was the one holding it back. And with that, the wall between the brothers began to crack. Not because of royal protocol, but because of Catherine's quiet power. Something the world underestimated, but Harry never did. What came next would move Catherine herself to tears. The tearful moment Catherine didn't expect. Back at Adelaide Cottage, far from the chapel walls, Princess Catherine had no idea what was said between the brothers. But by early evening, a trusted aide returned with the details, and it stopped her cold. The words, "She's more than William's wife. She's my sister. I love her for loving him," echoed in her ears. And for the first time in months, she let the tears fall. Catherine had always been the quiet bridge between the brothers, never picking sides, never making headlines. But that loyalty came with weight. In private, she once confided to a friend, "I just want them to be whole again. For William, for the boys, for Diana." Now, hearing that Harry had spoken of her with such deep affection, it broke something open inside her. One palace insider revealed that she sat silently for nearly 10 minutes, staring at a photo of Diana that hangs in their drawing room. Then, softly, she whispered, "She'd be proud of him." The moment was raw, real, and deeply personal. She hadn't cried out of sadness. She cried because, for the first time in years, the pain didn't feel so one-sided. It felt like maybe, finally, there was a shift. What made it even more emotional was how unexpected it was. Catherine had never demanded praise, nor did she ever expect it, especially not from Harry after everything that had happened. The interviews, the distance, the silence. But now, he had acknowledged her strength, not in a press release, not in a photo op, but in a private moment, with no one watching. That's what made it real. Later that night, William returned home. No words were needed. He simply walked over, took her hand, and sat beside her. For a few minutes, they said nothing. Then he quietly told her, "He sees you now. He really does." And that was when she smiled through her tears. Because for all the pressure, all the headlines, and all the coldness of royal life, what mattered most was finally being seen. Not by the world, but by family. And just like that, Catherine became more than just the future queen consort. She became a symbol of quiet strength, and maybe the very thing that held the royal brothers together when everything else fell apart. Harry's open confession. "It wasn't you, William." Inside the chapel, after the emotional tribute to Catherine, the room fell still again. That's when Prince Harry took a deep breath, looked at his brother, and said something no one expected. "The world thought I was angry at you, but it wasn't you." It was the moment that changed the reunion. For the past 5 years, Harry had carried the image of the rebel prince, the one who left, the one who spoke out, the one who broke the royal code. But now, in this quiet chapel where Diana's presence hung in the air, he spoke not with bitterness, but with honesty. "I felt unheard," Harry admitted. "I felt misunderstood. And at times, I felt unloved. But not by you. Never by you." The admission hit hard. It wasn't an attack. It was a confession. And it peeled back years of silence. Harry then shared something he'd never spoken about, not even with Meghan. During a therapy session in 2021, he had been asked what moment made him feel closest to his mother. It wasn't a grand royal appearance. It was a stormy night at Balmoral, when he was just 6 years old. Diana had held his hand and told him, "Don't be afraid of the noise. It's just sound." He paused and looked at William. "I think we forgot that. All this, press, drama, it's just noise." The message was clear. Their feud, the years of separation, the interviews, it was all a distraction from what really mattered. Their grief, their mother, and the bond that had always been there, buried under headlines. William didn't interrupt. He just listened. For the first time in years, Harry wasn't speaking to journalists or Netflix cameras. He was speaking directly to his brother, and every word landed. As he ended, Harry looked over at William again. "Thank you for bringing her into the room today. She deserved that. And so did we." There was no applause. Just a stillness filled with meaning. And for the first time since Harry walked away from royal life in 2020, the world saw him not as the runaway royal, but as Diana's son, reaching for something that had always been there, waiting to be rebuilt. Next came the moment that turned pain into purpose, William's own confession. And it was heavier than anyone imagined. William's private guilt. "I let her down." After Harry's vulnerable confession, the room could have gone quiet again. But it didn't. Instead, Prince William stood once more, and what came next was nothing anyone expected. His voice was lower now, almost shaking, and what he said wasn't planned. "I've protected the wrong people," he admitted, "and I stayed silent when I should have spoken. For her. For you. For all of us." This was the future King of England, stripping away titles and tradition. He wasn't speaking as a royal. He was speaking as a son, and as a brother who had made mistakes. William confessed that during the peak of the fallout in 2019, when the press went after Harry with brutal force, he wanted to step in, but he didn't. "I thought breaking silence would break the crown," he said, "but I didn't realize it was breaking us." Then came the most haunting detail. William looked directly at Harry and revealed a memory he'd never shared. "The night before Mom's funeral," he said, "I stood in the corridor staring at her photo. And I heard her voice, not a sound, but a feeling. She wouldn't have wanted us like this. At war." Harry's eyes welled up. He had never heard that before. Not from William. Not ever. William admitted that for years he carried Diana's image like a shield. He thought honoring her meant defending the monarchy at all costs. But somewhere along the way, he lost sight of her voice. "I failed to speak for her," he said, "but I won't fail again." That line alone made headlines just hours later. Even Catherine, when she was told what William said, was reportedly overcome. Because for her, this wasn't about a speech. It was about William finally letting go of the weight he had carried since 1997. And in doing so, he gave Harry something neither of them had ever been allowed to feel fully: permission to grieve out loud. As William returned to his seat, the air shifted again. Aides in the hallway later described the silence as not empty, but sacred. Because what just happened wasn't rehearsed, wasn't strategy. It was real royal history unfolding in whispers and broken voices. And it led directly to the moment that united them. Not with power or politics, but with the memory of the one person who'd always known the way forward: Diana. Diana, the light between two broken princes. With emotions still raw, William stood again, not to talk about himself, but to talk about her. "Mom taught us something this palace forgot," he began. "You serve with empathy. You lead with presence. You walk beside people, not above them." The room fell still. Everyone knew who he meant. Princess Diana, gone since 1997, was now the only thing strong enough to pull these two men from the edge. William spoke of their childhood visit to a Brixton homeless shelter in 1993, where Diana had knelt down to speak eye level with those in need. "These are the people we serve," she told them. "Not the tabloids, not the tradition, the people." "She never wore the crown," William said, "but she wore the people's trust." And then came a moment no one expected. William turned to Harry. Their eyes met. And with no blame, no anger, he said, "We both inherited her mission. We just took different roads to carry it." That single line dissolved 4 years of speculation and tension. There was no accusation, no judgment, just truth. Harry gave a slow nod, not a dramatic gesture, just one that said, "I hear you." And for the first time since their public rift, both brothers stood on the same side, not politically, not institutionally, but emotionally. William then admitted something he hadn't said out loud, even to Catherine, that many of his choices since 2020 had come from fear. Fear of public backlash, fear of letting go of control. But Diana? "She wasn't afraid," he said, "and I don't want to be either." At that moment, it became clear. This reunion wasn't about healing a feud. It was about reclaiming Diana's legacy, not as a memory, but as a mission. The chapel, once filled with tension, now felt lit by something stronger than grief. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was understanding. And for these two men, whose lives had been shaped by one woman's love and one nation's pressure, that understanding was everything. But outside the chapel walls, the world was only just starting to hear what happened. And when the public found out what Harry said about Catherine, everything erupted. Public shock and global meltdown. By 2:35 p.m. that same day, the silence inside the chapel had turned into a media storm outside it. The first leaked headline exploded across screens. "Harry says he never stopped loving Catherine." It hit like lightning. Within 30 minutes, major networks like BBC, CNN, Sky News, and even ITV broke into scheduled programming. On social media, the hashtags were everywhere. #DianaBridge, #KateInTears, Royal Reunion, each post more emotional than the last. But it wasn't just the reunion that caught fire, it was the content of it. Screens were flooded with quotes: William's guilt, Harry's confession, and most of all, his words about Kate. The world hadn't heard anything like it. Not from him, not ever. One viral image sealed the moment. A side-by-side photo of the brothers walking behind Diana's casket in 1997. And then again, side-by-side in 2025. It earned over 4.2 million likes in just 6 hours. Underneath it, someone had written, "Diana's boys, back together at last." Polls followed within hours. 67% of Brits said their view of the monarchy improved after the reunion. In the United States, that number jumped to 73%. The public didn't just react. They felt something they hadn't felt in years when it came to the royals: hope. And at the center of that emotion wasn't just William or Harry. It was Catherine. Her name trended globally, not for what she wore or said, but for the strength she represented. People saw her as the steady heart in the chaos, the one who stood tall while others fell apart. Royal fans, long divided between the brothers, found common ground. Commenters said things like, "She held the line for them," and "Diana would be proud of both of them and of Kate." But while the world was weeping and reposting quotes, inside the palace walls, something entirely different was happening. Because not everyone was happy, this story was finally being told. The palace's cold panic behind closed doors. As the reunion story dominated global headlines, Buckingham Palace was in crisis mode. Behind closed doors, aides weren't celebrating. They were scrambling. Because what unfolded in that private chapel wasn't just emotional. It was dangerous to the tight control the palace had kept for years. According to insiders, Queen Camilla's office was furious. Her team rushed out a cold, clipped statement. Her Majesty remains committed to continuity within the monarchy. It was meant to create distance, and it did. The message was clear. This was a family moment, not a constitutional one. Meanwhile, a separate palace statement landed just before 8:15 p.m. The royal household supports all efforts to strengthen family unity. Private moments remain private. It was short, sanitized, emotionless, deliberately so. But it wasn't working. Inside the palace, one senior advisor warned, "We've lost the narrative." Because for the first time in years, the public wasn't siding with the firm. They were siding with emotion, with Diana, with Catherine, and with Harry, who had now become, intentionally or not, a truth-teller. Even King Charles, watching parts of the chapel meeting via a discreet relay feed from Windsor, was said to be emotional but cautious. Privately, he was glad the brothers spoke. Publicly, he feared the institution was slipping out of his hands. Things escalated when a powerful quote from William leaked. "The future doesn't belong to silence anymore." It was supposed to be cut from all official summaries, but it was already out and spreading fast. By midnight, the palace communications team was locked in strategy calls, offering off-the-record quotes to journalists in exchange for softer coverage. But it was too late. The moment had gone viral. And for once, the monarchy's silence wasn't protecting them. It was exposing them. Outside, the people were moved. Inside, the crown was shaken. And quietly, some insiders admitted what no press statement ever would. Kate is now seen as Diana's true successor, and that terrifies them. Next came the moment the world had been waiting for, the rising of Catherine from quiet royal to the emotional heart of the monarchy. Kate and Diana, the unbreakable thread. In the days that followed the reunion, one name refused to leave headlines: Catherine. Not because of anything she said, but because of what she represented: grace under fire, just like Diana once had. The comparisons weren't just emotional, they were everywhere. Diana's famous line from 1995 echoed across social media. "I want to be queen of people's hearts." Now, people were saying, Kate already is. What started as a private tribute had quickly become something bigger, a cultural reset. When Prince Harry called Catherine his sister and said he loved her for loving William, it reframed everything. She was no longer seen as a distant royal figure, but as the emotional center of a family that had nearly collapsed. A close royal confidant revealed that William, in a private moment days after the chapel meeting, told a friend, "Kate's been my anchor through it all." And now Harry sees that too. It wasn't about status, it wasn't about titles, it was about truth. After all the years of silence, Harry saw the woman who held the family together, not just for William, but for the memory of Diana. Public praise exploded. Overnight, online searches for Catherine's charity work tripled. Charity donations made in her name soared. Even her older patronages, often overlooked, were flooded with letters, messages, and support. One comment went viral under a photo of her at a children's hospice. "She doesn't have to be loud to lead." Inside the palace, the mood was more complicated. Some insiders whispered that her rising popularity made her too emotionally powerful, especially compared to Camilla. But the public didn't care about internal politics. They saw something real, something lasting. At Kensington Palace, flowers began arriving, just like they once did for Diana. Letters addressed simply to Kate read things like, "Thank you for being the calm," and "You made them whole again." And in private, Catherine responded the way she always had. Quietly, gently. When asked by a close aide how she felt after Harry's words, she reportedly smiled and said, "If this helps heal them, every tear was worth it." Now, with the public seeing her not just as the next queen, but as Diana's emotional heir, Catherine's role had shifted. She wasn't just standing beside the future king. She was holding the memory of the past and becoming the bridge to something entirely new. But the story wasn't finished yet, because the final moment inside the chapel held one last message, one that spoke louder than any press release ever could. The final moment that changed everything. As the chapel service drew to its quiet end, the atmosphere felt almost frozen in time. There were no royal carriages lined outside, no thunder of reporters or sea of waving flags. There were no trumpets or formal announcements, just a long stone aisle, and the soft echo of footsteps that belonged not to princes, but to two sons walking away from years of silence. Prince William was the first to move. He walked slowly, past the rows of wooden pews, past the flickering candles burning low near Diana's memorial plaque, past the memories that had shaped him. But just as he reached the chapel's exit, with the sunlight spilling in from the heavy arched doorway, he suddenly stopped. He turned around, and there, standing at the threshold, was Prince Harry. Still. His hand was resting gently on the worn wooden frame of the chapel door. His head slightly bowed. His shoulders tense, but not in anger. In emotion. There was no embrace, no dramatic gesture for headlines. Just a shared pause. A heartbeat stretched in silence. A single nod from William. And then, both brothers looked up. Eyes drawn instinctively to the high vaulted ceiling where Princess Diana once prayed in that very same room during her darkest moments. That's when it happened. The only photographer allowed on site, a trusted royal documentarian, quietly raised his camera. He didn't ask for a pose, he didn't interrupt. He simply captured the truth. William and Harry, walking side by side. Not ahead, not behind. Together. It was a photo that would sweep across the world within hours. The image didn't just show two royal figures. It showed what the world had been hoping to see since 1997. Diana's sons, together in purpose, together in pain, together in healing. As they exited the chapel grounds and disappeared into the private gardens of Sandringham, an aide overheard William lean toward his brother and whisper 6 quiet words. "Let's not lose this again, Harry." But that wasn't the line that shook the world. The next morning, as press gathered near Windsor for unrelated royal duties, one journalist called out, "How are you feeling after yesterday?" William paused, then he turned, smiled softly, and said just 5 words. "We speak for her now." That quote went viral within minutes, printed in bold across every front page, repeated in every news anchor's opening, not because it was rehearsed, but because it was real. Those words weren't for the crown. They weren't for the institution that had forced them into silence for so long. They were for Diana, for her legacy, for the children she raised to feel, even when the world told them not to, for the love she gave without condition, and the lessons she left behind like breadcrumbs, scattered in interviews, gestures, and handwritten notes. And now, nearly 3 decades after her death, her voice had finally returned, not through a royal speech, not through palace PR, but through her sons. Of course, the reunion wasn't a fairy tale. Not everything was resolved in that chapel. There were still unanswered questions, still Camilla's icy silence, still Charles's cautious distance. The world knew better than to expect overnight healing from wounds this deep. But what mattered most wasn't perfection. It was progress. Because for the first time in years, the royal family didn't feel like a machine. It felt like people, broken but trying, divided but not beyond repair. And it all came down to one truth. That moment inside the chapel wasn't for cameras. It wasn't for headlines. It wasn't even for the monarchy. It was for her, for Diana. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real royal story begins again. Prince Harry's words cut through years of pain, and for the first time, William let the tears fall. This wasn't about royal roles or media headlines. It was about two brothers, one truth, and the mother who still connects them. The walls are cracking. The healing has begun, and the world is watching.